In this video, I want to do something a little bit different than I've done in my other videos, and I want to talk about a book that I read. This book is The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins. And I picked up this book a while ago because I wanted to understand a little bit better about atheism, particularly the new atheism that we see today, and what the ideas behind it are, and what the logic is for it. And I really wanted to understand more about atheism because I know a lot of atheists in my own life, and I never really engaged them in conversation about it very much. Mostly it's people that I work with and things like that, and I don't, bring up the topic very much, just to keep things peaceful and be respectful of people. But I am interested in understanding a little bit why they think the way they do, and where their atheism comes from, and how they feel about things. And I know that this book has been really foundational for a lot of atheists today. And I decided to pick it up and read it so that I could understand my friends and colleagues who are atheists better. And I think it's really important just to understand about the people that are around you. One thing that sometimes I feel a little bit frustrated with atheists because they don't seem to take religion very seriously. And I feel that if they took religion more seriously and they studied it in a more rigorous fashion, they might understand a lot more. So I wanted to do the same thing with atheism. I wanted to read this book and understand where they're coming from, and hopefully have a little bit better understanding of the people around me. So I read the book. I didn't exactly finish it. I didn't finish like the last chapter, but I got through the whole argument. By the time I got to the last chapter, it was more of Richard Dawkins' thoughts on things, and I didn't feel like I really needed to read further to understand what he was trying to say in this book. So I stopped, but I did get through the argument, and I just wanted to share some of my thoughts on it. I think that I'm qualified to share a little bit. I'm a graduate student in a doctoral program. I'm in my fourth year in physical sciences. So, I'm being trained as a scientist and understanding how to use science and what science is about. And so is Richard Dawkins. That's part of why I picked his book versus some of the other new atheist books, because Richard Dawkins is a scientist, and so I could relate to him in that way. And so I kind of feel like I can comment a little bit on what he's saying. And I want to comment on basically what he laid out on page 188. And then I want to talk a little bit about what I think's wrong with it, and why I personally do believe in God. And so hopefully you find that interesting. And so I'll start here. He has 6 points laid out in his book. The first point is that one of the greatest challenges to the human intellect over the centuries has been to explain how the complex, improbable appearance of design in the universe arises. And I would agree with that. So he's saying that one of the greatest challenges of humanity has been to understand the world around us and why it appears so designed. And in point 2, he says that the natural temptation is to attribute the appearance of design to actual design itself. So he's saying we're tempted to see the world around us, see how it looks so designed and so intricate and intelligent, and to assume that means that there was a designer. In his point 3, he says then that this temptation is a false one. And he says it's false because the designer hypothesis immediately raises the larger problem of who designed the designer. So here's where I break away from Dawkins. And as a scientist myself, I think he's right that we look at things in the world and we see that they look designed, and we are tempted to assume that, someone designed them in a deliberate and, magical fashion or something like that. And, it's really not the case. We know from the theory of evolution, which I think is actually a very good scientific theory, seems to explain a lot of what we see around us, that material things have come through a whole process of development. And, things didn't just pop up out of nowhere. God didn't just literally say something and then it appeared, with no process involved. We see from scientific evidence that there has been this process of evolution. And to me, I don't see a conflict there. I see, the way that God works, even in my life, in a more personal way, is usually through other people and through a process. God usually, if I pray about something that's going on in my life, usually God doesn't just poof, make it better all of a sudden out of nowhere. Everything goes through a process in a very natural sort of way, and God brings certain people into my life and certain material into my life to help me understand more things. And so, I don't think that evolution in any way disproves God. I think that it just shows us more how the material things of the universe came to be, and how God uses natural processes to create natural things. But here Richard Dawkins says that the problem is that not that we have this appearance of design and that evolution explains it, but instead that we couldn't have a designer because we have to be able to explain the complexity of the designer. And here's my first point about this book and the new atheism, is that they seem to assume that God is a physical being, like a physical being that needs to have an explanation the way that material things do. And this really messes up really the Christian understanding of God in the first place. We don't understand God as a physical being that's complicated and needs explanation. We understand God as something outside of the physical universe. If you look at the arguments for God's existence from Thomas Aquinas, my favorite one from him, I think, is the argument from contingency. And the argument from contingency basically says that everything in the universe, it does not explain its own existence. I'm here because I was born of my parents, and my parents were born of their parents, and so on. And, this book is here because someone printed it in a printing press, and the paper came from a tree, and the tree came from a seed, and the seed came from another tree that was, had evolved and came from, all of the history of everything. You can go back always, back and back and back and back, and nothing in the universe explains its own existence. Not even time and space explain their own existence. Time and space exist through the universe. They're part of the universe. And so if you go back all the way then to the beginning of time and the beginning of the universe, the furthest back we can see as scientists is to, some, minuscule fraction of a second after the Big Bang. And before that, we don't know. There's a lot of speculation, I think, about it. And, I'm not a cosmologist or anything, so I'm not specialized in this. But there's not a good scientific explanation why there is something rather than nothing. Because everything in the universe is contingent upon something else to explain its existence. And Christianity argues that there is a non-contingent being. And the reason why something exists rather than nothing is because there's something which exists by its own essence. It doesn't need something else to explain its existence because it is itself existence. And that's the Christian argument, and that is really the opposite of what Richard Dawkins is saying. Is he's trying to say that God would be too complicated to explain his existence. We could never explain God. And Christianity tells us that God is the reason for his own existence. So he's really missed the boat of, what the Christian argument is and what Christian idea of God is. Then he goes on after point 3 and says that, the most ingenious and powerful explanation so far discovered is Darwinian evolution by natural selection. And I think that, he's right, that Darwinian evolution is a great explanation for why the material things in the universe have come to be, and a good material explanation for the development of biological life, but it still doesn't answer the question of why is there something rather than nothing. And I think he acts a little bit as if Darwinian evolution answers the full question when it doesn't really. Then point 5, he says that we don't yet have an equivalent explanation for physics. So he does admit then at this point that we don't actually have an explanation basically for why something exists rather than nothing. Why do we even have a universe? And why is the universe so finely tuned, as some people have described it, to allow for the existence of planets and matter and eventually life? And here he appeals to the idea of multiple universes. And, okay, he can do that, but he's left the realm of science at this point. Science does not teach us that there are multiple universes yet. Maybe some people think this, but it's highly, highly controversial. It's definitely not standard, respected science, at least at this point. And he argues that, in the future it will be, because it has to be, kind of. I think he just is expecting it to become respectable science. Maybe someday it will, that there are multiple universes, and that can explain why the universe is the way that it is, because it's one among many. But it still doesn't explain why something exists rather than nothing. And he never gets to that real question. He's always sort of stuck at that, that 1 second after the Big Bang, and he doesn't really go back before that. And that's really, I think, his greatest downfall, is that he dances around the real question, but he doesn't address it directly, and he only addresses the idea of God in a very sort of nonchalant and unintelligent way, by just saying, well, can't be God because God is too complicated, when he has the whole nature of God sort of confused. But then his last point is basically that we should not give up hope that science will be able to explain us. And I think his last point really sums up what his whole idea is, and that is that science is the explanation for everything, and we should not appeal beyond science in any way. We should only have science as our way of understanding the world and of life. And I think that's really what the New Atheism is about. And being a scientist myself, I can understand why someone might think that way, because science is a great way to understand things. It's rigorous and it's testable. It's, you can prove theories and disprove them, and it's a great method. And we should want to use science. Like, anytime that we can use science to answer a question, we should probably do that rather than just guessing about it or something like that. But I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to make a part 2 of this video. But in the next video, I want to talk about really this question of whether science can explain everything in the universe, and whether it makes sense that it should explain everything in the universe. And I'm going to give just a little bit of my perspective on that, as a person and as a scientist. So hope to see you in the next video.